Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Shernette Dunn, and I will be presenting about cultural diverse students to you for this presentation. And I will also be focusing on content area literacy to support students in higher education. So I will go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay, so for this presentation, like I said, I'll be focusing on content area strategies, but the premise will be focusing on students who are culturally diverse and first generational students and those in developmental education. And as I said before, my name is Dr. Shernette Dunn, and I'm the director for the First Year Success Program at the United States Air Force Academy Prep School in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So just sit tight and listen to the presentation, please. And just before we go further into the presentation, I'd like to just, discuss what content area literacy is, because, sometimes people may not necessarily understand the difference between teaching reading courses and teaching content area literacy. And that's something I like to highlight because I teach reading, and there's somewhat of a stigma attached to teaching developmental reading where, college students may feel like I don't need reading because I can already read, but there are different nuances in how to read different literary texts based on the content area, because reading in math is totally different from reading in the sciences and vice versa. Reading in the humanities is also different. So as you can see, the definition states that content area literacy and disciplinary literacy are umbrella terms that describes approaches to literacy instruction that are embedded within different subject areas and within their discipline. And this is even something that's well established within the International Literacy Association. So that's why I'm highlighting this, because, in higher education, we may not necessarily focus on reading so much, but it's a very important skill that we still need to address, because a lot of our students are coming to us not prepared to read at the academic higher education level, the different content area texts that are presented to them. And as I continue, I'm just going to put this on the slide sorter so it's easier to navigate. And you can see, as I explained to you earlier, I direct the first year success. I also teach reading, and I work for the military academy. So the student population that I normally work with, they are students who are between the ages of 17 years old and 22 years old. Some of them are prior enlisted, and that means they were serving in the Air Force for maybe 1 to 3 years. Then they performed exceptionally well, and their commanders or leaders have asked them to join the Air Force Academy to become officers instead of enlisted candidates. So a large population of our students, they're also recruited athletes, and they're very ethnically, racially diverse. So we have the diverse part of the academy where we serve just about everyone. We really contribute greatly to the cadet wing. We give at least a third of the diverse student population to the cadet wing each year. And the majority of our students are educationally underprepared or unprepared, and not necessarily that they're coming from poor school systems, but a lot of times, their views on what college is supposed to be like is very inflated in high schools. They get a lot of, pat on the back, so to speak, you're doing a great job. And when they come to college, it's a very strange, different environment, and they don't know how to navigate these spaces. So that's why we teach different reading strategies that will help them to navigate their content area courses. And the content area that we primarily focus on, it's STEM programs. We do a lot of science, which is chemistry and physics. We also focus a lot on mathematics. And when we say mathematics, we go from trigonometry to calculus to math apps, like engineering type math. So it's a lot of math that is focused on, and the vocabulary that's presented is somewhat very challenging for them. So I teach them skills such as how to effectively read their textbook, learn the content area vocabulary, because each content area have their own unique vocabulary. And we learn to analyze and synthesize different textbooks. So that's what we do in the content area reading classes. And the reason why I embarked on this research that I'm presenting now, as I explained earlier, there is a stigma attached to teaching reading in the college setting because they're all of the auspices that, okay, I'm already in college, I know how to navigate these spaces, and as a result, I don't need reading classes. So they were very resistant to being placed in the class. They feel as if, okay, I'm the student who's not educationally prepared. So that was one of the reasons. They lacked the necessary skills. They were very unmotivated, and a lot had a negative mindset and also low self-efficacy. And in addition to the emotional or subjective side of their feelings, there were also hard objective data, because these students who were placed in reading classes, they scored at the lower percentile on either the Gates-McGinnity diagnostic reading test or also the Accuplacer diagnostic reading test that we're now using. But over the last 6 years, that's the reason why they were placed in reading classes. And in order for us to embark on the change and do something different to help our students, we realized, or I realized, because of the person who oversees the reading, I realized that the old methods, they weren't working. And I assessed the situation. We did needs assessment. I interviewed current and former students. I interviewed USAFA, and that stands for the United States Air Force Academy professors, to determine what are some of the needs they're seeing with their students. And I implemented more content area reading that was relevant to the current needs, because prior to doing the needs assessment, the focus was on teaching reading strategies that are more geared towards, humanities, how to organize your stuff based on, patterns of organization or text structure, a lot of, content area reading that was more focused on, understanding and comprehension. But I realized that a lot of times they wanted the comprehension piece, but they lacked the vocabulary necessary to understand basic concepts. So this is an example of what I started to do to get them to love reading. We started working on a reading log, and they could read anything they wanted to read. And most of my students were male. So, they were all interested in becoming fighter pilots, and they were reading about, different planes and stuff of that nature. In addition to that, a lot of them wanted to become scientists or read about, various scientific trends. So these are just two examples I pulled. And as you can see, when we started in 2019, the premise was that they would have write at least 3 to 5 sentences for their reading log, so it wasn't laborious, or it's not any additional pressure on them. However, as time progressed and I realized they're really embracing this concept and this idea, I started to increase it to 5 to 7, and some of them went to town and they would do 10 or 12, 15, but they were really getting involved with it. So that's one of the objectives, that was to develop a love for reading, and that's how we approach that. And here's an example of how I approached reading in the content area. This is a math problem. And as you can see, together, 1 9-ounce serving of plain non-fat yogurt and 1 ounce serving of Swiss cheese contains 676 milligrams of calcium. The yogurt contains 4 more than twice the calcium in the cheese. This part is highlighted in a different color, and you may see the 4 more than twice the calcium in the cheese. That can be a little bit confusing. So I would help them to set up the problem, where they're finding the calcium content for each food. So first, we're saying Y equals calcium content in the yogurt, and then C would be the calcium content in the cheese. And if they define their variables well, they can replace a lot of the words. Together, Y and C both contains 676 milligrams, and Y contains 4 more than twice C. We're not necessarily solving for answer. We want for them to find how to set up the problem. Once they set up the problem, then they can solve. So you see 2C plus 4, that would be how they would do it. Y equals 4 milligrams more than twice C. So 2C would be the twice, then plus 4 more. Sometimes they get confused. Should we multiply, or should we do something else? But just showing them how to set it up is still reading, integrating math concept, because this is actually a problem that they did from their textbook this semester. And, common reading strategies that I use with them to help them to navigate vocabulary or different strategies are, we'd use the KWL chart. What do you know and what do you want to learn? Because a lot of times they're coming in frustrated. I don't know this. I don't get this. Math is hard. So we take a step back and we look and see, what is it you already know in math? What is it you already know in chemistry? Okay, so let's start with where you are. We know this. So now we need to learn X, Y, or Z. So we want to learn, what is stoichiometry, what is, trust, or anything they're working on. And once they figure out, what they want to learn, we develop a plan where they can work towards learning it. And I'm very pro working in groups or pairs. So a lot of times one may not know something and the other knows, and they all help each other to become proficient in the area. So that's one of the things I do to help them with that. We do a lot of anticipation guide for their upcoming, chapters or sections, because a lot of times they go to class very unprepared, because time is a very big factor, being at a military academy. So I will just go to class and say, let's open your textbook and turn to the next chapter you're going to work on. A lot of times I have no idea what the topic is about, or how to actually solve these problems, because chemistry and math is not my forte, but they understand enough to be able to get a grasp of what they're going to be learning in future classes. They can start writing down questions. Okay, I don't know this, and they go to class more prepared. We do a lot of survey, question, read, recite, and review, and that goes very much in line with their anticipation guide, where they're asking these questions that they need to know further. And a lot of times too, we also do question answer relationships, but that's after they've learned the content. When they're practicing their end of content or end of chapter, quizzes, or practicing for GR, which is an exam in most civilian colleges, we call them graded review. So they do QAR relationships when they're studying. And for vocabulary, we normally use the Fourier's model here, where they define a word, they use it in a sentence. Sometimes they may give a synonym or an antonym, and then they have to, put a pictorial representation of the word where it's meaningful to them. And a lot of times too, when they're reading work in English, we have them use the Pomodoro technique, where they're, focusing for a short period of time until they can build up their stamina. Normally, I'll have them read for 10 minutes, then we go up to 15, 20 minutes until they can do a true Pomodoro. And whatever they learn in the class, they normally take it back to their dorms. And these information are normally spread gradually, because they'll show their roommate or someone in their squad, and they know, okay, this is something we can use. And like I explained earlier with the anticipation guide, that's something they do for physics. What do you know about X? What will happen if, do you agree or disagree that X, Y, or Z? What is the benefit of learning about this? So these are some of the things we do. And because we're doing a virtual presentation here, unfortunately, I don't have the physics worksheet that I presented in the original workshop, but I had the participants in my workshop, look at a physics paper and, just see what they know. It was about force and motion. So we were using prior knowledge to learn the content we were focusing on. So, and there goes my carrot. There's always a little carrot being dangled for someone to know the benefits of doing whatever it is they're learning, because a lot of times they may be oppositional to learning, but if they can see how it relates to them, their life, or the real world, they're more okay with doing something, or actually just trying to do something that is a little bit challenging for them. And like I said earlier, I use the Pomodoro technique a lot. It's an active and engaged reading strategy, and I'll try to see if it will play for you. So I'll just give you a few minutes of what the Pomodoro is. Okay, while she's asking us to take a break, I am just going to go ahead and continue with the presentation. We've watched about 3 minutes of the 6-minute video, and I know maybe this is where you're losing focus. So this is what the Pomodoro technique is in a nutshell. You're free to use this with your students. You can Google the Pomodoro technique, but this one from Socratica, it's one of my favorite. There's a lot of other, directions on how to do the Pomodoro, but this works really well. And I would definitely encourage you to try if you haven't tried it as yet. You just type in the name Pomodoro, it's on Google, and you can use it. Students absolutely love it, especially when they have to do a lot of reading. So that's my little plug-in right there. All right, so how do I remember that word? I'm sorry, I made a typo there. How do I remember that word? Like I explained earlier with the vocabulary, a lot of times students may not get a question correct because they're not very comfortable with the vocabulary for the specific subject area. So we use different graphic organizers or different ways to help them to remember, whether it's a note card, dual coding, or whatever strategy that they are comfortable with using, you allow them. So like I said earlier, the Freier's model is very important to me. A lot of K-12 teachers use this, and I see where it's working wonders with my students. So we define the word, and sometimes the definition may not necessarily be the dictionary definition, but a definition that they understand. It could be the definition from the glossary of the text, but just make sure they understand it. See here, I have the term quadrilateral. It's not necessarily a term they use very often, but I just wanted to break it down where you're able to understand and see how it could be applicable to your content area. Here goes the definition of four-sided polygon that has 4 sides, 4 angles. And what are the characteristics? So if we're going to talk about the characteristics, we talk about each side, or it's all equal to 360 degrees. It's a closed figure. It has 2 diagonals and everything, the characteristics of a quadrilateral. Non-examples would be a circle, an octagon, a star. And we could talk about examples as well. When we say quadrilateral, we mean 4 sides. It could be a rhombus. It could be a square, a rectangle, a trapezoid, or a parallelogram, something that they can associate with. And like I explained earlier, this could be done in a myriad of ways, because here I have examples and non-examples. However, you could draw a picture, you could have them write it in a sentence. Whatever works best for you, you could adapt to your own learning situation. So please feel free to make this change however it would be best for you. And when I teach reading, like I said previously, a lot of students do not see the value in reading. It's like, oh, it's just an extra class. It's wasting their time. I could be doing a lot of other fun stuff other than doing reading. But there is value in having effective reading skills, because it doesn't only help you in reading class, it helps you across the content area because it increases your fluency. It helps with time management. If you know how to read your chemistry textbook effectively, the time you would have taken without having that skill, you're able to go ahead a lot faster. You have active reading strategies, because a lot of college students, they struggle with, internal distractions. They're reading and they're thinking about what they're going to be doing next. And if we have these strategies such as the Pomodoro technique, or, annotating while we read, looking for specific vocabulary words, this will help them to be actively engaged, question, answer relationship, think and search, the author and me. All these different strategies that we integrate into the class will help them to be better readers and, more active time managing participants. And it also increases their comprehension and it increases their vocabulary, because when we use academic vocabulary in a variety of contexts, our vocabulary just becomes stronger in general. And the main thing that we focus on is for them to improve their GPAs and self-concept, because if they don't have a certain GPA, they will not be able to move on to the next level. And I'm very big on professional development, because in addition to being the facilitator for the reading and, study strategies first year success program, I'm also the person who's in charge of professional development to support students. So it's very important that we conduct professional development as educators, because in order for us to know what our students actually need, we can't just go by, what we think or, based on a whim. It's always important that we conduct needs assessment, because the students will tell you specifically what they need. And when we're doing needs assessment, it's good to send out, check a box here, but sometimes our needs assessment can be multifaceted. Do a qualitative approach, do a quantitative approach, do mixed methods, so to speak, and also do focus groups, because a lot of times if you have the space or the resources, just providing lunch for the students, they will come and tell you exactly what's on their heart and what they need and how we can better support them. Sometimes with you being in the institution, your colleagues may not necessarily want to hear what you have to say, because we're all in the same boat. But sometimes if someone from the outside come and say that, you'll be surprised at, like, wow, it's like new information, the best thing since sliced bread. But outside consultants or trainers can add value to what you're trying to establish when you have faculty who need to know this information and they may be oppositional towards it. Be purposeful and in your practice, whatever you're doing, make sure that we're purposeful in it, develop it, a changed mindset, and we have to build trusting relationships, because if your students trust you, they will do just about anything you ask them. The same thing with staff members. Don't just do it because of your leadership role or your administrative power. Do it in the sense that students are able to trust you, trust their leaders, and there's a trusting relationship. When we see the need, how will learning these skills, concept, or whatever it is we're implementing, how will it better serve the students? How will it make the institution better? Because a lot of times we make changes and it's all about, our attrition rate. Prior to the pandemic, a lot of colleges and institutions were focusing on retaining students. But if we can see the why in what we're doing and we're purposeful in solving these challenges, we will be able to retain both students and staff, and we will have some of the best institutions. And it's just very important that professional development focus on all students and all, subject area. How can we better support our students? And I know this is talking about reading strategies, but these were some of the strategies that we presented based on, the content area. However, like I alluded to earlier, if we as educators, administrators, professors, student success personnel, if we have that love for our job, love for our students, if we build these trusting relationships where they are able to hear what we're saying, we're not looking down on them. It's not like I'm picking on you. I'm just telling you this so you can be better. We are empathetic to their needs, because a lot of times they are going through a lot of struggles. And what I have realized in a lot of my research, there's a huge disparity between the faculty population and the student population, especially students who are in the area that we serve in student services or just developmental education in general. They're coming from what we would call underserved backgrounds. A lot of them are migrant students. A lot of them are coming from, less than appropriate educational backgrounds where, you know, there are holes in their learning, there are gaps in their learning. They are language minority students, and they have a lot of challenges that they're bringing to the classroom. A lot of times they're first generational college students. They may not necessarily understand how to navigate college. So just don't think that because, you know, you went to college, what your college experience was like, that theirs is the same. A lot of these students, they're working 2 or 3 jobs just to survive. A lot of them are taking care of family members, whether here in the United States or in their home country. And like I said, their language may not be English, or their first language, excuse me, may not be English. So these are some of the challenges they're struggling with, not to even think about the financial barriers that a lot of our students have, because like I say, when we're talking about underserved students, these are students that are coming from households that are less than 25,000 per year. And we have to be cognizant of how these students are coming to our learning spaces and how we treat them, so they can realize that there's a sense of belonging, they're important, they're valid, and you're here to support them. So if we have these main strategies, love, trust, and empathy, they will motivate our students to achieve their dream and go above and beyond our expectations. So these, in addition to the reading strategies, are what I would strongly suggest we encourage within ourselves and within our faculty, you know, administrative realm, so that students can be successful in their educational endeavors. And that's the end of the presentation. I know you may have questions, and if you ever do have questions, I ask that you please reach out to me. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I am very passionate about student success. I have been doing this for years now. I am a migrant student. I am a student who's first generational, and you know, coming to the United States, my background in education was different. So I associate with a lot of these students. I am not a counselor or, you know, someone with a psychology background, but I realize that my profession has evolved into someone who do a lot of counseling and support for students who are from these underserved population, especially, you know, female students, African American female, Hispanic females, and now I'm even supporting the Asian students a lot because of, you know, there's not a lot of people who are from the minority population at my institution. So I am pretty much it, and I support students. And, you know, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of knowledge I've gained, and I would love to communicate with other professionals out there who are doing the same thing, you know, maybe hear what's going on in your realm and just share with you. So please, please, please send your questions my way. Here's my contact information. If you have the time, or you'd like to further this conversation, you can reach me on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and there's my email information. I also have a website. You can go to my website, and I would definitely love to get in touch with you. Thank you so much for your time listening to this presentation. I hope you found some valuable information, and, you know, we would continue this conversation. So that is it from me. You have yourself a great rest of your day, and until then, goodbye.